Welcome everybody to November 2025's webinar, and this one's titled Market Update and Opening Day. I'm your presenter today. My name is Dan Krug. I am the CEO and Senior Wealth Manager at Daniel Krug and Associates. And I want to thank City National Rockdale because they just do a phenomenal job with research and getting us data, along with other wealth managers that we work with, to really be able to make decisions and keep you informed. So, opening day, we're not talking about baseball here, we're talking about the government opening up. So I've got a slew of information for you, a little bit about the markets, the economy, and how are we going to be reopening this country, and will it affect us? So let's go ahead and move forward. We're going to talk first about the economic speedometers. And again, City National puts these out, and you can see two sets of speedometers here, one for September, the other one for November, which is where we are today. And what you can also see on this chart is that there are 4 green boxes in November. And as we've always said with these charts, these speedometers, the way to really look at them is red is bad, yellow is kind of neutral, green is good. And we are actually increasing the number of green dials. And the first one is the yield curve. The yield curve, if you think about it, they've been talking for months, maybe I think we can actually say years now, about how the yield curve is potentially getting inverted and how that is bad for the economy. Well, that has absolutely turned the corner. The yield curve looks good. So the 10-year treasuries, and we'll talk a little bit more about them, are in solid place right now. And the economy, looking forward, is looking pretty good from that angle. Consumer spending is another one that notched up a little bit, hasn't gotten into the green territory yet. But what this is telling us is that the consumer is still in pretty decent shape right now. They have enough reserves and feel comfortable about spending. And then interest rates. As everybody knows, the Feds had just lowered interest rates again, and there is talk of another reduction in December. So the interest rates, whereby when you think about mortgages and you think about auto loans, the Fed cut doesn't directly affect them, but it is going to be a byproduct where those rates will start lowering down. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Energy costs. Energy costs is another big one here. As you know, energy costs affect every aspect of the economy. And it is one of those things where as the energy costs go down, the economy kind of speeds up a little bit. Profits get better for companies, and the bottom line for us at the house also gets better. Now, there is one category within energy that is a potential problem moving forward, and that is electrical costs. With the amount of pressure that's being put on the energy grid, primarily because of AI and the farms that are being created, they really have to work on the infrastructure, building it up, and that is going to cost a little bit, and it will be reflected in our prices, and I'm sure you're already feeling that right now. That being said, overall, we're looking pretty good from a economic speedometer standpoint, sitting in November, going into the holidays. Now, when you look at the economic forecast, our chart here, we're actually introducing 2026 estimates. And the way to read this chart, again, you've got 24 through 25 at the top. On the left-hand side, City National forecasts for real annual GDP growth, corporate profit growth, headline CPI year-end, and interest rates. So looking at the GDP from 2024 ended up at about 2.5, which is really respectable. Coming into 2025, City National is looking at estimates between 1.25 and 1.75. Now, when you look at their counterparts in the industry, the consensus is more like 1.9. Then you move over to 2026, and it looks like the overall consensus is at 1.8, which falls in line with what CNR's estimates are. Now, let's go over to corporate profit growth, because I'll get lots of questions about whether the market is ready or ripe for a crash. And the answer to that really is not really. And why do I say that? Well, let's look at the corporate profits growth. In 2024, it was at 9.6. And as you know, we've had a pretty good run up since then. And profits are what drive the market. If you look at the 2025 estimates, they're looking at around 9.15 as a consensus, and CNR, anywhere between 9 and 11%. And those are respectable profits for companies. And the other thing to think about here is going through the last earnings season, 82% of the companies beat their estimates. So the companies are in pretty good shape right now. You look forward to 2026, and the outlook, again, is very nice. I mean, we're looking at double digits from corporate profit growth, and that's, again, year over year. The companies are just doing a very good job of getting the money to the bottom line. That helps shareholders. Now, headline CPI year over year, when you're talking about inflation, 2024, we were at 2.9%. 2025, the consensus effectively says it'll be around 2.8. Citi thinks it's going to be a little bit higher than that. And I believe that really has a lot to do with how they're projecting out relative to energy costs. Looking at 2026, again, 2.5 to 3% from Citi, and about 2.9 is the consensus. So we are going to have a little bit higher inflation, but nothing that isn't manageable. When you look at the interest rates, again, we talked about the fact that the Feds had reduced the rates again. By year end, the consensus is between 3.5 and 3.75 for CNR, but the consensus overall is at 3.83, just a little bit higher than what Citi thinks it's going to be. And then looking at next year, they're looking at lower rates even for next year. So it does look really good for 2026 when you're looking at corporate profits, Fed rates, interest rates. And we talked a little bit about the yield curve. You're seeing here with the Treasury note, the Treasury notes, even though the rates are coming down, the yield curve is looking better, and they're actually in normal rate range right now and looking at it moving forward. So, the stock market, the economy, we are not expecting any kind of major problems with either of those two moving forward. Certainly not for the next 6 months, but very likely all the way through 2026. Now, we're going to talk a little about government shutdown. What was different this time? Well, the biggest difference, as you can see on this chart, is the length of the shutdown. This time it lasted 44 days. The last longest shutdown was also during Trump's administration, the first one, and that was 34. But the next that even came close would have been Clinton in 95, 96. So it has been a much longer time, and people, in the beginning were thinking, well, the longer this goes, the bigger the problem there's going to be for the country. But the question is, I understand that there were pockets of people that absolutely did get affected by this and did feel it, but the consensus is the average American did not really notice much going on with the shutdown other than a lot of news out there. And the biggest reason this one went longer really had to do with the expiration of the Affordable Care Act when it came to the subsidies. I believe the Democrats, because they were really pushing hard to get these subsidies back in there, they turned down an agreement 14 times before they finally came to a full agreement Thursday. But it did result in the government opening back up. And now the question is, did it affect the stock market? Well, looking at this chart, I'm going to say it really didn't affect the stock market at all this time. The shutdown actually occurred beginning on October 1st, ran till the opening back up today. And the interesting thing is when you look at the trajectory before and after the shutdown, It didn't move. It's still moving forward, moving up, and again, the stock market didn't feel this shutdown at all. Now, the shutdown is over. So the next question is, when will things get back to normal? Well, we actually Googled top 4 questions that people had, and the first one was, when will federal workers get back pay and return to work? Well, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy basically said that air traffic controllers will be receiving 70% of their back pay within 24 to 48 hours of the shutdown ending. And other departments may take a little bit longer. But the interesting thing is all federal workers are entitled to back pay under the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019, which was signed into law by Trump during his first term in office. So he clearly had provisions in there. Everybody was going to get paid once this whole thing was over. That's not to say that people didn't have to tighten the belts a little bit if they worked for the government, but it did work out for them. Now, the next item, when will the stamps benefit be fully restored? And a spokesperson for the White House Budget Office insisted this week that the beneficiaries will see their accounts fully restored within hours of the federal government opening. So that's going to be in good shape right there. Anyone who needed assistance relative to food stamps will be getting them. And then really the next one, when will air traffic get back to normal? Now, this is a big one for everybody because we're coming up to what? We're coming up to Thanksgiving, the holiday season. People are traveling. They want to make sure that they can go from point A to point B. So what the overall consensus is that everything should be pretty much normalized for the holidays, Thanksgiving, probably a week before. So there should not be a problem with the traffic controllers being in place and the airlines getting all the flights out on time. Well, mostly on time. So let's look at the next one. The next one is, when will economic data be released? Well, the average person probably doesn't care too much about this, but if you're in the financial world, it's important. The Bureau of Labor Statistics will probably be able to release job market data from September within a few days of the government opening up. The other reports from September, such as data on retail, could also come very quickly. So again, for us, a little bit of delay on this is not going to make much of a difference relative to the decisions we're making. We're not in the middle of a crisis. It's not like we have to have data every minute to make decisions. We are looking at things from a long-term perspective. So something like this really has not affected our game plan. Now, the government's open, which is very good. They've come to an agreement, but the reality is this agreement only takes them to January 30th. So we have a little bit of a reprieve getting through the holidays, but they are going to be coming back at it in January, trying to work out the budget moving forward. So there'll be a lot of news coming down the road. But that's it for today. If you need to go back and review some of the videos that we have, you can just go to our website, click on Visit with Us, and it'll take you directly to our YouTube site. And that's pretty much it for us. You guys have a great Thanksgiving holiday. Don't worry about what's going on with your investments. We will take care of that. There's no need to worry. We are ready for 2025 and beyond.